That's a long time. I should have some great stories, full of telling details of the kind that Stephan would have if he were writing a story. Faced with my task today, I keep coming up blank. Stephan and I were thrown together when the Inquirer created a cultural department after the Bulletin closed in early 1982. I left the Inquirer at the beginning of 1996, and Stephan and I were next to each other for almost all that time in between. As we know, he kept working at the Inquirer for decades more, amassing thousands of stories, many of them seemingly routine, a body of work that revealed to Philadelphians not only the treasures in their midst, but also much that had been suppressed, forgotten, or even literally buried. The time we worked together was in retrospect a golden age for American journalism, and for the Inquirer in particular. What I remember, though, is that we complained just about every day.
That's so true.
About the Inquirer, our co-workers, about the city, about the state of the world. Stephan played, at least, a world-class pessimist. He seems to delight in telling me bad news or making dire predictions. I've never seen him happier than he was the day that Wall Street crashed in 1929. And when it came roaring back the next day, he said to me, "Same thing happened in 29." He did his doomsaying with some surprisingly high spirits, often with a low, simmering chortle punctuated with the occasional guffaw. I think it was that dark laugh that led one of our colleagues to call us, she thought, behind our backs, Beavis and Butthead. Tom Wolfe once wrote that while news reporters competed with their counterparts in other publications, the feature writer's rival is sitting at the next desk. And actually, both Stephan and I probably consider ourselves primarily reporters, Stephan more so. But there's nevertheless something challenging and invigorating in seeing somebody who might just be better than you are. He was certainly more energetic and more dogged, reporting on his beat in the culture wars that surrounded it, while also pursuing long-term interests in prison conditions and a number of other things. For a long time, we had to share a single computer terminal, but he was never not at it. Writing stories, taking notes on telephone interviews, transcribing interviews. It was so bad, I started doing most of my writing at home. The last time we spoke, a couple of months ago, I reminded him of the way he used to drive me crazy about this. And he claimed not to know that we were supposed to be sharing. That was like him. He often seemed to be in a world of his own. You would see him deep in his thoughts, and as with a sleepwalker, it seemed very dangerous to interrupt. He was patient. He carried on as the Inquirer's ambitions shrank. When I would talk to him after I had left the paper, he would report that his morale was low. But then his morale had always been low. He just ignored that and kept on doing very good work. He even, in 2014, helped convince me to go back as a part-time art critic, which I did for 7 years. About the newspaper, he was both an idealist and a realist. In a book review, he once wrote, "The Constitution guarantees a free press, but it doesn't guarantee that people will be interested." And alas, nobody seems to be interested anymore in what either of us did. But we Philadelphians know less today. I just wrote it. I'm talking about Stephan's great writing. I have a sentence that makes no sense at all. What I'm saying is, we don't have Stephan, and now we know less. I fear that to mourn Stephan is to mourn the cause of granular, locally rooted journalism that Stephan practiced. But while I've placed an emphasis first on hard work, as Stephan would, it was done in the service of a moral vision and a precise, lively style. While preparing for this talk, I reread parts of Stephan's 2010 book, Mohammed's Ghosts, a work that I think really shows what he was all about. Very early, I was struck by what seems to just be a bit of description. I'm quoting now. Looming over all, just behind the hum and rattle of I-95, the Allied chemical complex sprawled, mainstay, lifeline, and sometimes explosive threat to the neighborhood. At times, the outlines of its intricate maze of pipes and tanks covering 45 acres near the Delaware River flickered in a tracery of bright white lights, another worldly outline of the toxic workaday world. One sentence. This single Dickensian sentence perfectly evokes a physical milieu along with its paradoxical impact on its neighbors, whom it employed and poisoned. A few paragraphs later, he writes a very short sentence. Fear is the clay of power and of reality itself. I can imagine him composing this grim sentence and smiling, even laughing, and then moving on. After all, he had a book to finish. In another of his reviews, he begins describing a central character, and he says, he is the most ordinary of men, a journalist. Well, we know that Stephan was an extraordinary journalist and an extraordinary man.